Welcome back to the Communication Mastery podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes, because we understand that communication is the oxygen of teamwork. We all need communication to thrive in life and work. And in this podcast, we want to increase your communication mastery so that we can all learn to adapt to one another and be effective in our communication. So thanks for being here. Let's learn together. Welcome back to the Communication Mastery podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes, because we understand that communication is the oxygen of teamwork. We all need communication to thrive in life and work. And in this podcast, we want to increase your communication mastery so that we can all learn to adapt to one another and be effective in our communication. So thanks for being here. Let's learn together. And this week, because we talk a lot about active listening on the podcast, I thought we'd focus in on active listening. And I've got 9 different skills that all contribute to active listening for us to run through together here. Because it's important for our communication. It's actually so vital that we learn active listening and actually apply it effectively. Because to truly connect with somebody else, or even with a group of other people, I've got to be able to listen to hear and to understand, and not just listen to respond or react. And so it's crucial that I follow these 9 steps or these 9 skills so that I grow my active listening. I promise you, this is something I've had to work at, and I'm still a long way from where I'd like to be in terms of being able to listen actively and effectively to other people. But here are the 9 things. Number 1, when someone is speaking, don't focus on what you're going to say next. So make yourself hear what they're saying. What is this person saying? Can I actually capture what they're saying? This is all going on in the mind as you're listening. Can I capture what they're saying? Can I remember what they're saying? Can I understand what they're saying? So give them your full attention and process their words first before you let yourself go to thinking about, now what do I want to say in response? If it makes you nervous that you're not going to have a response ready when they stop talking, you can always say, wow, give me a moment to respond to that. Let me reflect on what you just said before I speak. You can add a little word like that you don't have to think about how to say that. You can just keep it in your pocket, if you like, in order to be able to listen fully to somebody's conversation before you respond. Number 2, when you're listening to someone, don't use what the psychologists call the still face. There was an experiment, you can Google this, it's fascinating, but there was an experiment done years ago now called the still face experiment, where they took a baby and a mother, and the mother was told to not give any facial expression or any sound to her response to the child as they interacted with each other. And the effect on the child was amazing. When we don't get any kind of feedback, whether it's facial expression or tone of voice, from someone who's listening to us, we don't get that feedback. It really puts us into distress in our communication. So don't use the still face when listening, where you're just blank, staring, with no facial expression, no vocal expression, no movement. Instead, you can nod, you can keep eye contact, you can make small verbal acknowledgements. It doesn't mean that you have to give the impression that you're agreeing or disagreeing. You're not saying yes or no, but you could say, uh-huh, or oh, or I see, those kinds of things. Those little verbal expressions can increase the connection, specifically if you're keeping eye contact and maybe nodding or just moving your head in ways that indicate that you're hearing what you're hearing. It doesn't, as I say, have to indicate agreement or disagreement, but it can simply be an acknowledgement that you're hearing. Gives the person that's speaking to you the feedback that this is being received. So that can be so important. The third key to active listening, it's a skill we have to grow. It's to pick up on tone and any emotion in what's being communicated. So don't focus on just the words that a person is using, but so that you'd ignore maybe how they're using them. Some of us are very good at just picking up on, well, you said this, but you notice even in the change of tone in my voice there, I may be reacting wrongly to the words that were used because I haven't taken into account the tone of voice that was used. I've seen it again and again when trying to help folks who are struggling with a disagreement or a conflict, where they will take the fact of the words and ignore the tone, and in either unwittingly or intentionally increase the conflict rather than resolving it, because they're ignoring 80% of the communication. So pay attention to body language, pay attention to tone of voice, even the pace of what they're saying, as well as the words that they're using. Just the words alone don't give you the full communication. So pick up on tone and emotion. It's a key part of active listening. What tone am I hearing? What emotion am I seeing? What kind of pace is what is the pace of communication conveying to me? Is this person speaking really quickly, or is this person speaking slower than I would expect them to? Those two different paces tell me a lot about what's going on with the one I'm listening to. So make sure you're aware of the tone and the emotion and the pace of the communication. Fourth skill of active listening is to make sure you eliminate interruptions. Really be aware of the danger of interruption in the skill of active listening. So don't cut people off in mid-sentence where you just butt in with a thought or a comment or a disagreement. You don't get the benefit then of what they were going to say. Force yourself not to finish their thought for them. That can be a challenge if you're quite a verbal person and the one who's speaking to you is less verbal. They may have pauses in what they say so that they can reflect on what they want to say. If you felt the need to jump in any of those pauses, you need to watch when you're practicing active listening that you don't finish someone else's thoughts for them. It's a challenge I have frequently as I'm coaching. I don't want to jump in and miss what it is that's going to come. And I have to deal with any degree of frustration when there's a pause in someone else's communication. It may be that I'm able to just keep talking and convey what I want to say, but others may not have that gifting. They may be more cognitive, with deeper thinking, and it's worth waiting to hear what's going to come. So beware of interruptions. Wait for them to complete their thought before you respond. Fifth skill is clarification. So as you clarify what you think you've heard, you begin to more fully understand what you were supposed to have heard. When I assume that I've understood, that's always a pitfall. I haven't truly understood what you're saying to me until I can paraphrase what I think I've heard and ask if I need clarification. But then also having done that to say, so did I get what you were saying, or did I miss something in what you wanted to communicate? Clarifying is always a very valuable middle step in active listening. So what I heard you say was you're concerned about this issue, or what I heard you say was you're doing really well with the progress on these three parts of our goals, and then there's one that you're having more difficulty with. Is that right? Did I hear you correctly? Did I understand what you were saying? Asking for clarification and then switch back into active listening. So again, once I've clarified, that's my thoughts being conveyed back to you. But now I need to switch back to fully hearing what you're saying rather than processing what I thought I heard in my own mind and waiting to respond. So back to point one, focus on what they are saying, not on what I'm going to say next. American business wastes billions of dollars every year on miscommunication. If you're ready to change that trend, invest in Communication IQ today, because it will give you a great return in terms of employee alignment, retention, customer engagement, profitability, sales outcomes. All of those areas will grow as you understand the science of communication. So go to my website at markburlinson.com, click on the business button, and let's have an introductory chat today about how I can help your business be more productive by enhancing communication. So that was the fifth skill, clarify so that I can understand more fully. The sixth one kind of goes along with it, and that is don't move on too fast. Give it time for the conversation to convey everything that's needed for that communication. So a conversation that's ended abruptly without follow-up questions is really a wasted opportunity. You want to explore what's been said by asking open-ended questions or thoughtful questions that are going to lead to a deeper level of discovery or a deeper level of discussion. So questions like, so what was that like? Or how did you apply what you learned there? Or what were your biggest takeaways from that? Or how did that affect your next steps? Those kinds of questions that invite further input, that dig a little deeper. The follow-up questions mean that you don't end the conversation too abruptly and waste what you have said by misunderstanding, by being only halfway through what you can learn. We already said about beware of interruption. That's when I interrupt you when you're speaking to me, or you interrupt me when I'm speaking to you. Number 7 skill is to also avoid distractions. These are interruptions from outside of our conversation. There are multiple things that can distract us. Of course, our phones are the biggest one these days. We are being gradually programmed by the technology to be constantly distracted from what it is we're supposed to be doing or want to be doing. The urgency of the now really overrides any effectiveness in communication when it's taken to extreme. So don't let your mind wander. Because of that sense of distraction from texts and social media posts and different inputs from our phones, then very often we also carry that over into the way our minds work. And we can be constantly distracted by either the last challenge we faced. Did I do that right? Could I have done it different? What would I have changed? Why did they respond the way they did? I'm distracted by something that's not the conversation I'm having now because I brought it in with me from before. Or it may be that I've got something next after what we're talking about that's different, and that's distracting me. My next challenge, my next task, my next appointment. I want to make sure I also guard myself from being distracted by those. Don't let your mind wander. Stay present in this conversation. Sideline the other things until later. And here's a little tip that I've learned. Don't just resist those distractions. I mustn't think about that sale I lost. I mustn't think about that argument I had with my friend. I mustn't think about that mistake I made yesterday. If I keep trying to push it away, I'm actually giving it attention. I need to acknowledge that there's something there and then put it aside so that I can come back to it later. So it's almost like I'm putting it to the side in my experience, in my mind. Okay, I lost that sale. I'll reflect on the lessons learned later after this conversation. So I kind of mentally put it to one side and now focus back on my active listening with you so that I gain the benefit of this interaction and mine it for everything it can give me. There may well be an insight or an inspiration in something you say that will help me in that other thing that I need to come back to later. But if I'm distracted, I may miss the benefit. The 8th skill of active listening is to respond with understanding. Very often when you're active listening, you'll gain more out of the interaction, and some of that may press buttons in your own emotions, in your own thinking. So don't allow defensive emotions, don't allow reactions to reject what you're hearing. Receive it and then process it. It helps to pause before you respond, even after someone's finished speaking. Maybe they've said something you don't agree with. Maybe it's something political or something religious or something some cause or issue in society today that you have differing opinions on. There's plenty of that around, isn't there? But if something like that comes up, count to 5 before you say anything, so that you give yourself space to reflect what's helpful to say and what's unhelpful to say. Can I put aside my disagreement, or can I simply say, I think we'll need to agree to disagree in that area, but let's look at this, that we can find some common ground, or let's talk about this area where I think we can learn more from each other. Let's zero in on the areas where we can find some common ground, or we can allow our communication to move us forward toward a goal, rather than being distracted with issues that cause us to react to one another negatively. I want to respond with understanding. I want to be receptive to what is valuable. I understand what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I will take that into consideration. And I value the fact that you've said it, and that we're in a setting where you can speak your mind, where you can give me your input. Is there anything more that you'd like to say around this issue? Or could you develop for me that thought that maybe was less contentious or less reactive than the other thing that I might respond to by cutting you off? Those kinds of reactions, to respond with understanding, is very helpful in an active listening setting. And then the 9th skill is probably the most important one to remember in terms of applying what you're receiving and gaining from an interaction, whether it's with a group of people or with an individual. And that is always to summarize the conversation, always summarize the interaction to confirm the key takeaways from our discussion. We communicate to impart wisdom, knowledge, understanding, insight, revelation to one another. And so we want to make sure we capture what it is we've gained from our conversation. So don't miss the most valuable part of an active listening conversation just by walking away from it at the end. Instead, affirm what you've received by giving some simple summary of the key points that have been covered. Something very basic, very simple, but so what we've said is that the sales goals for this next quarter are going to be challenging to receive, but if we focus on the deliverability of the new project, that's going to help our sales goals. Something like that. Those kinds of summaries help to crystallize for you and the person you've been listening to what it is we're taking away from this conversation. It doesn't have to be fully action-based, where now you're going to go and do this and I'm going to go and do that, but we're simply stating what we've achieved by having our interaction, by having our conversation. And it proves that the active listening worked. I've been in settings where it's been very difficult to complete that simple summary at the end. And that shows me that I haven't been listening as actively as I wanted to, or that the person I'm interacting with has not been able to fully convey what they have to offer or what they want to communicate. And sometimes that means you can say, you know what? I'm having difficulty summarizing what we've said in our conversation. Can we take 2 more minutes and you say it again, maybe in a slightly different way, so we can capture a summary of what we've talked about and what we've learned from each other? Very often that will open the door to maybe a restatement that will be the key to the value of that conversation. We get to some clarity, we remove some jargon, we get rid of some defensive reaction, or we move into the active welcoming of what the other is saying, so that we can both receive it. All of those 9 skills are vital in active listening. And you will find that active listening makes a huge difference to the way you lead your team, to the way you interact with your boss, to the way that you are able to complete sales, or the way that your customer service interactions with others become so much more simple, so much more fruitful, more resolution to the problems that are brought to you, simply because you invested the skill of active listening. You don't miss what's being said, you capture it, you dig into it, you mine it for what it can give you so that you can reach the goals and the purpose for which you're having the conversation. So I hope that's helpful to you, and we'll leave it there for this week, but come on back next week for another episode of the Communication Mastery Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.